morning, you're watching Business World Live. I'm Danie Laurel. It's 10 a.m. this Friday morning here in Metro Manila. Let's go straight to our top story. The Bangko Sentral kept benchmark interest rates unchanged yesterday. That's amid a benign inflation outlook and signs of economic recovery. You can see on your screens here the Monetary Board kept overnight reverse repurchase, lending, and deposit facilities at the record lows of 2.25%, 2.75%, and 1.75% respectively. Bangko Sentral Governor Bendiocno described this as a prudent pause that's amid manageable inflation and an improvement in domestic economic activity following the relaxation of lockdown measures. The Bangko Sentral joined the central banks of Thailand and Indonesia, who also kept interest rates on hold this month. That is to give previous adjustments the time to take effect. The Monetary Board has so far slashed benchmark rates by 175 basis points this year as it sought to support the economy against the worsening fallout of the COVID-19 pandemic. Meanwhile, the Bangko Sentral raised the limits on real estate loans of the big banks. That's in a move it says would unleash more than 1 trillion pesos in liquidity to further lift the economy. Universal and commercial banks are now allowed to allocate 25% of their total loan portfolio to real estate loans. Previously, the cap stood at 20% of the bank's total loan portfolio. Let's kick off the markets. Just as a reminder, markets and trading is closed today in observance of Ninoy Aquino Day, but we do have a lot of news to still be going through. Let's kick off with our local unit, the Philippine Peso, trading at 48.68 to the greenback. That's a bit of a reversal from the strengthening that we had seen earlier on this week. Now, before that BSP rate announcement, which was, however, largely anticipated, the peso actually weakened 0.2%. That halted the 5 straight days of gains, but nevertheless, we are still at 48 levels. These are the strongest levels we've actually seen in at least 3 years. Now let's move over to other markets that have been open for trade this morning. Let's kick off with the US and how that performed overnight. You can see on my terminal here, the Dow Jones up by 0.2%, S&P 500 up by 0.3%, and the NASDAQ, take a look at the NASDAQ, another hefty gain, more than 1%. Technology giants were climbing. That brought the NASDAQ 100 to a record, and that had tempered concerns over a bumpy economic recovery. Treasuries, meanwhile, also climbed. Now, this rally in the technology heavyweights over in the U.S. actually offset a slide for the banks and energy producers. And this came amid the fact that there was earlier data in terms of the U.S. employment. The U.S. jobless claims unexpectedly rose to more than 1 million yet again that week. Now, that was, of course, reversing reducing claims in joblessness. So that was actually very disappointing U.S. job data, but still the technology heavyweights managed to lift the benchmark of the NASDAQ and even the S&P 500. Meanwhile, the dollar was also weakening. Crude oil retreated, and gold, which is largely considered to be a safe haven, continuing to rise. Now, on the trade front, we've actually got China, which has confirmed plans to talk with the United States officials soon to review progress on their preliminary deal. Recall that they had already reached the 6-month time check since what was supposed to be the first phase of their trade deal. They have not been able to discuss that further as of yet. Let's take a quick peek at the rest of Asia and which markets are opening or opened right now. You've got Japan in the green, so that is spilling over from the Wall Street gains over into Japan, and a lot of other markets in Asia. The Nikkei 225 up by 0.4%. The rest of China and Hong Kong as well enjoying pretty strong gains here this Friday. You've also got, let's take a quick peek at that FTSE Straits, that is over in Singapore, up by 0.15%. I just want to mention also over in Europe, there are a lot of things going on. For instance, in Italy, they've seen a case surge in COVID-19, another second wave that was the most infections they've seen since mid-May. You've also got the ECB policymakers expressing uncertainty at the latest policy meeting about the economic outlook. You've got UK consumer confidence remaining very weak in August. Recall that we had reported the second quarter GDP of the UK was the worst contraction they've seen in Europe. Meanwhile, over in Canada, you've also got plans to extend emergency income support another 4 weeks and even beef up more stimulus. Now, let's take a quick peek at how our markets performed yesterday. Again, markets are closed today for Ninoy Aquino Day. Now, stocks had declined ahead of the holiday yesterday. You can see on my terminal here, we were down by 0.6% to 6,005.40. That basically was a slump compared to how we were already gaining and rallying earlier on in the week. Now, there were so many things that happened this past week. First of all, a reversal back to less stringent, let's say, lockdown measures. We were back to a GCQ, but after that, it was announced that there would be a curfew, and that was more stringent than was actually expected by the market. Now, they also managed to pass the Bayanihan 2 economic stimulus package. Investors had to digest that yesterday. And yesterday, also, Luis Lamingan was saying, he is, of course, from Regina Cap, that the market's close was affected by the U.S. Fed's tepid economic outlook for the rest of the year. The Fed had called for even more fiscal assistance. You've also got Timson Securities' Darren Pangages saying that investors simply chose to take profits before markets closed in for the holidays. You can see on my terminal here how all of the sectors ended in negative territory. The drop was led by financials, down by 1.5%. Recall that this was just ahead of the Bangko Central meeting. Properties as well, down 0.7%. So no one really spared here. Holding firms as well, usually considered a gauge of the economy, down by 0.2%. And this amid very thin trading value that was just above 4 billion pesos, and foreigners remaining net sellers. We logged a net outflow of 357 million yesterday. So that exodus still continuing. Very quick peek on our leaders and laggards for that week. At least this week, you can see on your screens here, Robinson's Retail, the best performer of the past week, that was up by 7.3%, followed by DMCI up by 5.7%, and LTG Group. So a lot of these conglos still in the green, at least for that week. But you can see one of our biggest property players, actually Ayala Land, suffering the most in the past 5 days of trade. That was down by 5.6%. You've also got Metro Pacific that had come out with their earnings that was down by 4.7%. I just want to take a quick peek at the financial space because we did report on the fact that the Bangko Central, as widely expected, had maintained their interest rates on record lows here without cutting further. And you can see on your screens here how the banks performed. I'd already mentioned it was generally in the red, but you can see some standout players. For instance, BPI up by 1.6%. China Bank and East West as well. Now, again, we had also reported for the property space, and this might actually be benefiting from the fact that the banks now have more liquidity to be lending to our property players. So from the cap of 20%, it's now at 25%. And even so, yesterday we actually saw most of the biggest property players still in the red, with only three of them in the green. That's Double Dragon and Jerry up by 2.5%. Another one to be watching out for is Santa Lucia Land. That was trading flat yesterday, but they have just announced plans to issue 8 billion pesos worth of bonds. So that's going to be tapping China Bank, that at least in their plans, as their lead underwriter. And this amid the fact that their first half results were actually posting an 8% decline in net income, just over 670 million pesos. They had mentioned in that release that there were limited mall tenants, and that affected their rental revenues. Their rental revenues declining by 50%. Real estate revenues were also down by 22%. Now, another stock I want to be watching out for that we haven't really looked at in a bit of a while is Mega Wide. Mega Wide is widely in the news right now because of the fact that there are new issues being raised in terms of their GMR partnership in order to rehabilitate NAIA. Now, what's going on? That has hit another snag. The government has asked the JV to comply with some requirements under the Build, Operate, and Transfer law. So that's the BOT law. They said, this from the Transport Department, the NEDA's ICC, so the Investment Coordination Committee, wants GMR Megawide to clarify some issues on financial capacity and also the liability agreement of the consortium before negotiations can continue. Now, just to recall, on July 15, so just in the middle of the pandemic, they received the original proponent status for the NAIA upgrade after the government revoked the OPS, which was first granted to the super consortium with the 7 top conglomerates in the country. So what they've been proposing earlier on since March, it's around a $3 billion refurbishment of NAIA. They've now received original proponent status, but whether that will be continuing is still up for discussion. Megawide, amid that news, slumping by 2 6/10% to 6 pesos and 41 centavos. Meanwhile, Emperador is one stock that we've been watching out for, especially since it was added to the index, replacing Semirara, and that had actually brought it to one of the best performers year to date. And despite the fact that they had actually posted a 24% profit growth in the second quarter, that's around 1.87 billion pesos, despite the liquor ban in the Philippines, and their earnings in the first half up to 3.31 billion pesos, they're actually holding back their capex. So they're still very cautious on the future. They will cut their capex by 40% in underspending. They did mention they will not impair the future capacity of their earnings. That's according to their CEO, Winston Ko. So Emperador reversing course a little bit. They're down by 0.8%, but still trading well above 10 pesos. And finally, more on bonds here. You've got Phoenix Petroleum. Phoenix has also been asking for clearance from the Securities and Exchanges Commission. They've now received the green light. That's going to be 3.5 billion pesos of a notes offering. They can now proceed with that. That's part of the tranche of 7 billion pesos of debt papers that they want. They still have not specified what they're going to be using the proceeds for, but nevertheless, they have already mentioned that they have had weaker than expected volumes when it comes to their fuel sales. Of course, a lot of transportation now not being used, a lot of industries not needing that, and they have said that they will be swinging back to profitability in the next quarter. And finally, still on earnings, I did want to take a quick peek at Abs-Cbn, which has, of course, been in the news throughout this pandemic. They have incurred a loss, and that is 3 billion pesos during the second quarter. That reverses a profit of 696 million pesos that they saw in the same period of last year. That's on the back of second quarter revenues down by 55% to 4.7 billion pesos. Advertising revenues in the first half slumping by 54%. Consumer sales as well, double digit. Pain here down by 14%. Now recall that this, of course, following the May 5 closure, or rather a cease and desist order from the NTC prohibiting the continued broadcast. They did already announce a retrenchment program by the end of this month, and also closure of Quezania Manila, their theme park. Nevertheless, Abs-Cbn trying to keep their heads above water here. They were actually trading in the green yesterday, up by 0.4% to 7 pesos and 28 centavos. Okay, let's go through the biggest headlines that we are watching on Friday. It is a holiday, of course, but there's still several stories here. The Bicameral Conference Committee has harmonized their versions of the Bayanihan 2. Now, House Majority Leader Martin Romualdez says the Congress will ratify the measure next week following the Senate's same-day ratification, which was yesterday. The Bayanihan to Recover as One Act provides for 140 billion pesos in funding to various hard-hit sectors and 25 billion pesos more in standby appropriations. That's a total of 165 billion pesos. But Finance Secretary Sonny Dominguez told Bloomberg that it is not the size of the stimulus package that matters, but whether it is geared towards saving the productive parts of the economy. The Bicam version of the bill sets aside about 9 billion pesos for the education sector, 13 billion pesos for displaced workers, and 9.5 billion pesos for the transportation industry. Some 10 billion pesos worth of funding was also allotted for the procurement of vaccines that's once approved by the World Health Organization. Senator Sonny Angara says this will allow the government to begin the procurement process ahead of the completion of the Phase 4 clinical trials. Now, the Budget Department says it has released almost 377 billion pesos for COVID-19 response as of August 10th. Now, this means that pandemic-related spending has increased by about 2 billion pesos since the end of June. You can see on your screens here that more than half of the funds have been allotted to the DSWD, which led the distribution of the Social Amelioration Program. Now, the Finance Department, which oversaw the wage subsidy program, received 88 billion pesos. The Health Department received 49 billion pesos. DOLE was given 12.6 billion pesos, while the DepEd received around 11 billion pesos. Finance Secretary Sonny Dominguez reiterated the importance of prudent spending to conserve resources in case of a prolonged crisis. But Dominguez also said the government has sufficient means to raise funds and ramp up spending due to its strong fiscal position pre-pandemic. Meanwhile, car manufacturers are asking the government to review its support programs for the sector. Now, this as the health crisis continues to hamper production and car sales. Toyota and Mitsubishi Philippines have been participating in the Comprehensive Automotive Resurgence Strategy, or CARS program, which offers fiscal support to car companies that produce high-volume units for 6 years. However, this program has been ongoing. It's even before the health crisis began. Now, back in June, the government admitted that it had no immediate plans to revise a fiscal support program for the automotive industry, despite its sales slumping due to the pandemic. Campi President and Toyota FVP Romel Gutierrez warned that CARS program participants might not be able to reach target volumes. Recall that car sales saw an almost 50% decline in the 7 months to July. That's compared to the same period of last year, as stated in the joint report of Campi and the TMA. Year-to-date, commercial vehicle sales dropped 48%, while passenger car sales fell by more than 51%. At a time when families have been separated and many workers abroad displaced, there is a need for solutions and making sure our loved ones far away are taken care of. Here to share with us their platform called BeamAndGo, we have with us Albert Go, COO. Good morning, Albert, and welcome to the broadcast.
Hi, Danie. Thank you for having me in your show.
Thank you so much. Now, this is very exciting for me because I love having new product, not necessarily new. This you've been on board for quite a while, but new to our show. Just give our viewers here a flavor of what BeamAndGo is all about. What makes it so different from other, let's say, e-commerce platforms or remittance platforms? When did it start, and all of that?
Okay, first of all, BeamAndGo is a social impact payment and digital marketplace that empowers migrant workers by giving them control over their hard-earned savings. It's basically us shifting the empowerment back to the sender so that they can ensure that the families won't misuse the funds that they transfer to their families back home. And this is actually according to a study by the BSP back in as early as 2015 that 82% of the remittances of OFWs are actually meant for basic needs: food, clothing, day-to-day needs, payment of bills, anything that it's related to the families of the OFWs and their subsistence. But of course, in this time of the pandemic, we know what happened, that a lot of the OFWs started to struggle and lose their jobs. In fact, the economy, the data is showing that there's going to be up to 40% decrease of the remittances of OFWs in totality this year. And that is huge. That's why we're seeing that a lot of the OFWs are becoming more prudent, and that's why they are choosing the platform of BeamAndGo as an alternative option so that they can ensure that their loved ones will use it for basic needs. Now, your question there is what separates BeamAndGo? First is our platform is really highly curated. We have identified the categories that we want to onboard. to help the OFWs and also uplift them out of poverty. So we started with, in 2014 and 15, we started enrolling and registering the supermarkets in our platform through an electronic e-voucher. But what's unique about our solution is that the OFWs and their families can only use it for basic needs. They can't actually consume alcohol and cigarettes through that platform. And over the years, we have increased the number of merchants that we have there. We have the big brands there. As I can mention, some of them are the Gaisanos,
Mm-hmm.
the NCCC Group. We also have SM there. It's actually varies around to based on the needs of the segment. And we have over 1,000 branches in our platform. But of course, because of the pandemic, and a lot of your viewers would want to know about this is how about the pandemic where you know that a lot of the OFWs cannot leave their house or they're
Correct.
sending it to their family members who are senior citizens and it's not safe for them to leave their houses. We actually found a solution to that. It was just timely. Danny, just
Mm-hmm.
days or weeks before the pandemic, we launched Bigas Padala, we call it. Basically,
Nice.
it's 25 to 50 kilos of rice and we partner directly with the distributors. We started first launching in Metro Manila, and then later on, we were able to scale nationwide in the Philippines. And what's good there is the OFWs have been ordering. It's like selling like hot pancakes at this point, where a lot of
Correct.
people are buying every week. And daming umu-order. What's good about it is it tackles that issue of isolation. Kasi nga,
Mm-hmm.
because of COVID-19, a lot of the families have so much anxiety, they're stressed, and if they have to travel to the next supermarket, which takes them about 30 to 45 minutes away, then they were asking Beam and Go for a solution. That's why we added this Bigas Padala. And later on, I was shocked because these SMEs, they're starting to reach out to me. We onboarded, let's say, supplements,
Mm-hmm.
vitamins, and we also onboarded even some of these basic personal protective equipment like N95 masks,
Right.
anything alcohol that we've been selling at a very cheap price in our platform. And what's good about this, it helps them in their healthcare. Kasi nga, this COVID-19 pandemic, let me tell you the truth, it's
Mm-hmm.
not really a crisis of health. It's actually a crisis that exposed the labor sector in
Correct.
our country. So parang look at it, 340,000 overseas Filipino workers have lost their jobs. Based on the data from the DOLE, 135,000 were able to return back to the Philippines. A lot of them are still stuck abroad.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, if you look at it, some of them have even decided to just stay abroad because they don't know what's going to happen if if they return back home. There's no clear cut solution for them whether to start their business or to find another job. But if they see all these stories of 45% getting unemployed, it just without them returning pa to the Philippines, then
Ang hirap.
this,
Yeah.
yeah, this is like the
Yeah.
big question mark there.
Yeah, exactly. Albert, I love this platform now because, like, apart from being a reporter, it's also 10 years teaching financial literacy. That's where you and I sort of crossed paths as well earlier on. And one issue is really that, parang it's always been a pull system with the people, the families left in the Philippines asking for padala rather than a push system where the person, the OFW, is the one making the decisions on where the money should actually be going. So that's a great thing. I wanted to ask, what has been the reception and the change in culture? Because that has been something that has really hampered financial literacy for us here in the Philippines because nahihiya yung mga OFWs hindi magpadala. Kung 'di ba sasabihin ng mga tao
Correct.
here, we want mama, gusto ko ng bagong cellphone. I want, 'di ba? I need this new gadget. I want a new TV. How has that changed the game? Is that still a struggle for people? And is that actually already in the power of the OFW to say no? Gamitin mo lang yung pera for this, 'di ba?
Correct. Well, that's a very good question because when we first started Beam and Go, that was actually one of the main questions or criticism in our platform. People were asking, why would OFWs choose your platform, or even their families? Would they get mad? Would they
Oo.
complain na, Mom, bakit ito yung pinadala mo sa akin? I want cash for
Exactly.
myself. Pero at the end of the day, when we launched the platform, year after year after year, actually the volumes have been increasing. And in fact, at this time of the pandemic, it's becoming more apparent that OFWs, the resulting effect of this pandemic is that OFWs have started to become more prudent. And you can see it
Mm.
in our sales that from the first quarter prior to the pandemic to the second quarter of this year, we saw an increase of over 100% because of the ECQ. And then
Mhm.
it stayed there at that level for 3 months. But the last 2 months, because especially this month when the President Duterte announced the resumption of this GCQ or ECQ, the
Mhm.
last 15-30 days, we're seeing another increase of 80%. So what does this tell us? The OFWs are becoming more prudent also because they're scared. Anytime they might lose their jobs overseas, and those who have, some of them have even lost their jobs, naghahanap na lang silang paraan to stay alive overseas. So
Of
that's why they're
course.
very clear. Wow, this is a great platform, Beam and Go. Parang I can just choose to deliver meats, vegetables, and then in
Mhm.
pricing pala, I wanted to tell you, Danny,
Go
kasi
ahead.
sometimes the pricing sa mga groceries is a lot more expensive. Na parang why is let's say yung broccoli is so expensive, it's over
Mhm.
300 plus pesos, but if they choose these bundles in our platform, we work directly with these distributors, SMEs that drive the cost down by more than 50%, and that actually has become more a prudent and efficient way to help their families kasi besides them not having to go to the grocery, they can
Correct.
actually already stay at home tapos they deliver na lang in goods. And so far, we haven't received, actually, 99% are happy, I would say, confidently say, because we've invested a lot in our customer service. So you can see, why did I say we're a social impact startup? Because lahat po ng employees of Beam and Gold, there's like 19 of us, are coming from OFW roots. In fact, the people that
Wow.
we
Oo.
hired are returning OFWs. Their parents are working as domestic helpers in Singapore, Hong Kong. So nakikita nila parang yung drive that they work every day to ensure that the families receive the goods and have a very good experience with us. And what's good, Danny, is also our team can speak the dialect, which is Bisaya.
Mm.
Marami sa mga OFWs,
Ganda.
they're not
Oo.
from Tagalog speaking, they speak the dialects. And what's good, we can speak Ilongga, we can speak
Mhm.
Ilocano, Bisaya. So kaya ng team namin yon. So I think that's been the power and in advantage of BeamAndGo. So you can see, di ba, there are other e-commerce platforms.
Oo.
They were asking us, so ano itatanong nila parang, oh, anong difference sa inyo? That's one piece of it. The heart and
Mhm.
the people who are working in the company have that OFW connection. But another part of it is also yung in BeamAndGo, we have this extensive payment network that we have established over the past 5 years. So in other digital and e-commerce platforms here, they can only accept payments within the Philippine payment and
Tama.
digital system.
Yeah.
And then we've worked with, let's say, the mobile or the GCash equivalent in Hong Kong, in Singapore, in the UAE. It makes it a lot easier for them to make payments. Kasi nga, hindi po lahat merong credit card sa mga OFW. So we needed to find ways to make it easy for them to make the payments in our platform. I hope I was able to
Okay.
answer your
Yeah,
question there.
absolutely. Now, just before I let you go, I want to ask about your innovations going forward because you had already mentioned that even before the pandemic, you already were shifting from the coupon, type of you buy a coupon and then you get or a voucher and then you go to the physical store and then you can buy this. Ngayon, you're becoming a last mile sort of logistics company na rin, diba? You're
Yeah.
already, and you're even doing your own retail na rin, basically making these bundles. What's your innovations going to be moving forward now, not just in the pandemic but in the future, given that there's this whole e-commerce na lumalabas, and even the villaging, like you mentioned, but the small companies showing up in the villages, hindi na siya big
Yeah.
supermarkets, type
Correct.
of how can you do that, especially since these small companies don't yet have these vouchers, they don't have all of the e-payment systems set up yet.
Correct. And this, you'll be happy with this solution that we have, Danny, because financial literacy is very close to your heart. And one of the things that we are building is an ongoing partnership with a big relief and multinational NGO that we're possibly signing an agreement with to start this project. We call it Project Parencia to help launch our mobile wallet first in Singapore, and later on we will be scaling in Taiwan and Hong Kong. That mobile wallet will be the next version of Beam and Go that would have basically an ability for the OFWs to top up in that wallet. And then in our wallet, instead of sending cash to their families, nandun na po lahat ng needs ng OFWs. In fact, I mentioned 82% are for basic needs. So in that
Mm-hmm.
platform, we will have even tools for financial literacy, budgeting. In fact, what I was already discussing with our management team is being able to come up with a platform that we can educate the families of OFWs and even control down to the
Yeah.
SKU, kung ano yung ginagastos ng family nila, so that we can teach them and become more financially literate, because that's really the main problem of OFWs. In fact, di ba, past
Mm-hmm.
30 years, yung ano natin, remittances have been going up by record-breaking numbers. It's only this year that it's slated to
Mm-hmm.
drop. But that's so much money coming to our financial system, but how come poverty levels are still
Are
high?
still
And
low. Yeah.
it's because the money is there, but people are not using it that have that multiplier effect to really help restore and empower their families. So that's one big thing. And then second thing, before I forget, is because of this pandemic, we were able to actually repurpose the system that we've built, and we're
Mm-hmm.
working with financial institutions now, and it's actually already ongoing with Grameen Foundation and Cello Wallet and JP Morgan, where we're actually providing COVID-19 relief to over 35,000 families through our e-voucher system. And they chose us because bawal nga yung alak tsaka sigarilyo, and it
Mm-hmm.
goes directly to their needs. We started with the e-voucher system, and then later on in the coming months, we will be letting them choose the fruits and vegetables and meats in our platform para we're able to help them holistically, and hopefully this retrenchment thing is just will be a thing of the past, and as in the future, once the OFWs and they've I think it's Bernardo Villegas from
Mm-hmm.
University of
UNP.
Asia and the Pacific, meron siyang fearless forecast, and he thinks that actually at the end of the year, the remittances might shoot back up, di ba? So he's
Mm-hmm.
saying that
Yeah.
OFWs will always find opportunities to work overseas. So as we launch this platform that allows them to become more financially savvy, at least basics lang of financial literacy and saving and budgeting, in that platform, we'll be able to educate them. Actually, we're very excited with this platform as we launch it towards the end of the year, and hopefully we can make a big splash and get more users. At this point, we have over 250,000 registered users, but around 10,000 are active.
Active.
Hopefully, we'll get a lot more people that are active. Kasi pag financial literacy tool, and it's very easy for them to use through these quizzes and like online
Mm-hmm.
training that we'll be conducting, then the usage will actually definitely shoot up as we expect it to be.
Okay, so super exciting. I think I concur with that. There's a lot of studies also, Albert, that are saying that during the crisis is actually when the remittances become an insurance, and they actually keep becoming sticky, and people still start working hard to be able to support their families. So hoping for that, and congratulations on your platform. Maraming salamat. And to all of our OFW viewers, hope you guys check out Beam and Go. Thank you so much. That was, of course, Albert Go, COO.
Thank you.
And that's a look into the business day. Today is August 21st, 2020. Catch us again Monday morning, 10 a.m. I'm Danie Laurel, and we are What News.